I heard an interesting conversation I wanted to share with you. My regular coffee shop was closed yesterday, so I went to this place nearby that's this nice French-inspired cafe. They have nice decor. It's a little fancier, and they have these really nice tiles that are underneath their front patio. And so most people go there for lunch, but it was kind of before lunch, kind of brunch time. So I just went there and got a cappuccino. So anyway, I was sitting there, and these two women were sitting near me. One of them was probably in her late 70s, a very cool looking woman, long white hair, very well dressed. Looked a little hippie-ish. She had some tattoos and some cool, sort of like turquoise jewelry and a really cool necklace on. And then I gather this was her daughter, and her daughter looked definitely a little more sort of like, I don't know, mainstream. She's a mom kind of in the throw of it. It seems like, as you'll see, she is definitely a mom. But anyway, the daughter, blonde, dressed in like more, I don't know, kind of traditional clothes, like stuff that could come from Target, and she had her phone out. The mom was on the phone a lot. That's what I'll describe, as the mom and the grandma, because what they were talking about was the mom's daughter, who I gather her name was Maya. And so when I started perking up was when the mom said, so I noticed that she turns her phone around because she was scrolling a bunch at their lunch, and shows the grandma this picture of Maya, I guess is her daughter, participating in an ICE protest, anti-ICE protest locally. And the grandma responded with this emotion that I could see was mixed, where she didn't want to be negative to her daughter, but she also wanted to, I don't think she liked it all that much, which is interesting because during the conversation, the grandma is clearly a pretty liberal person, definitely all about like women's empowerment and all that kind of stuff. But the grandma basically gets into this thing where she says that Maya, who I guess is her granddaughter, and this student who's, I think she said she was 12, is not in a position to really make an informed decision about something as nuanced and complicated as ICE. But the grandma clarified to the daughter, to the mom, so this is her daughter, that it's not really about this fact that Maya can't really advocate for the issue in a really sophisticated way, but more that she kept on saying that childhood is about the luxury of a long view, which I thought was a really interesting concept that the grandma kept talking about. She was like, I think that it's important, this is the grandma, to be engaged in adult life when you're an adult. Like, I think that we live in a society where it's helpful if you participate in things you're passionate about. But for a middle schooler, she has this luxury of not having to do that. And I gather that Maya is pretty interested in music. And so it comes out in the conversation that her mom had Maya skip one of her music lessons so that she could go with the mom to Walmart to get poster board for designing some anti-ICE poster, and then that her teacher had praised Maya for her anti-ICE poster, and then the mom was really proud of that. And actually one thing I thought was funny is like while the mom is like saying all this stuff about how Maya is like finding her voice and she's so empowered and she's learning about civics, the mom like stood up at the table, and she was during the conversation she was constantly kind of like not fully engaged with the grandma. She was looking at her phone a lot, and so she like stands up and she like takes all these photos and does all stuff with her phone of her food, and then she's like posting, I don't know, something about her food, for social media, while she and the grandma are talking about this thing about this, Maya. And anyway, so the mom kind of posts her social media posts and goes on to talk about this, and how Maya's is so great in getting involved in like civics and standing up for right and wrong. And then the grandma's like, she is still finding out how to be in her own skin. She's not in a position to go and get involved in this. And I just feel like with where she goes to school, which I gather is a pretty liberal community, is Maya, is that when she's on the front line of an ICE protest, this is what the grandma was saying, that her being on the front lines of an ICE protest is a little dangerous, but also she kind of becomes this awkward like shield for the adults behind her to use her in something to their agenda. And this hippie mom, which the hippie grandma, which I was surprised at this because, she looked like a really liberal person, but she said, ultimately she wanted her granddaughter to learn to think for herself, and that was her main critique of the situation, is that when she doesn't have the history of knowledge and engagement with these issues and the understanding of them, that she's susceptible to being drawn into one side of the issue without being fully informed, which is in some way disempowering. So the grandma tells the mom that like true empowerment would be to tell Maya to pay attention and then to just reserve judgment, because these are the kinds of issues that she'll understand more as an adult. But the mom was not having it. The mom was like, she is all about inclusiveness. These kids get engaged at a much younger age. And if she has to skip her music stuff to go and protest ICE a few times, then that's fine. And then the grandma kind of pushes back and it's like, the music is the kind of stuff that, as a child, she has the opportunity to engage in her imagination and these more beautiful things that are detached from, sort of transactional politics. And it's just too early to push her into this, and that the music is the kind of stuff she can enjoy for her whole life, and that there's just not that much time for these types of luxuries. I mean, when you go off to college, that Maya is going to get engrossed in all sorts of things and may not have the time to cultivate this part of her person, and that childhood is really a special time to cultivate the soul. And I just thought it was a really interesting discussion of these children that have been participating in these ICE protests. So I don't know. I was torn, but ultimately the grandma I thought was persuasive, and I thought that it was interesting that it came from somebody like her.